I wanted to start, I always start by thanking the people that make this possible. We can imagine there's so many people involved in making this event possible, but especially for ADN. We're a small nonprofit organization based in Santa Clara, California, with a vision to bring Africans and non-Africans together to make a difference on the continent of Africa and the communities where we live. We believe in collaborating with people who don't look like me, and it works very well for our organization and our communities as a whole. And this event today, and the entire year actually started in 2022, when we started the campaign to ask diasporans to go beyond remittances. I'm very happy and proud to say that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation said, yes, we will support, and so they've been supporting us for the year. And I'm here also with the goalkeepers of the Gates Foundation, and I come very inspired today. I was at that event where everybody was feeling sad in a way that SDGs are not going to be met, but you hear the Bill and Melinda, both of them say, no, wait a second, we will do it. We can do it, we just have to keep focusing on what's important. And I think when I met some of the promises of Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asian countries, you can actually feel the energy that it is possible, and I continue to believe that is possible. So I give special thanks to the Gates Foundation for making this event possible for us, and special thanks also to KBF US, Kadi and John Paulo for being our partners for the last 5 years to do Unga in New York City, and really special thanks to all of you for that possibility. And the Dentons, how can I thank this group of people? They are so generous with their venue, their time, and the commitment to ADN and every organization that they meet. We have learned so much from the group by just talking to them, and they are hosting us. They hosted us last year and this year as well, so I want to give special thanks to them. And my team, Megan and Abdul, thank you for all the back work that takes place to make this happen. The ADN is a beneficiary of many of you, but specifically of our board. Josh, our chairman, is here, Josh Gaim. Thank you, Josh, for your support to the organization and for what you're doing to help us even grow more and better. For myself, since we've started ADN 13 years ago, and the first 8 years of the 13 completely volunteer, and then the last 5 years, I just left my job, my full-time job, and took ADN as a full-time job, which has been the greatest privilege of my life. Because I had no idea whether this was going to work or not, but it ended up working because of many of you said, we want to be a part of this network. We want to be a part of the change and the power that the diaspora is. And also it's the diaspora to reckon with. So we have been very fortunate in terms of making different programs to ensure that we're not just talking, we're acting. I've always believed that narratives don't change because you talk, narratives change because you act on it. And so we are really, really grateful for the work we do with the Africa Diaspora Investment Symposium. We have 4 programs. The Builders of Africa's Future, which is funded by the Conrad Hilton Foundation and the U.S. Africa Development Foundation. Thank you, Sister Jane, and everyone at the Conrad Hilton for making that happen. The Accelerating Black Leadership and Entrepreneurship, which is funded by Bill. It's a fintech company based in Silicon Valley, KLA, and other foundations as well. So we have 4 programs to make things work, and this is part of the Impact and Innovation Forum that's also funded by the Gates Foundation. But why did we start this conversation on beyond remittances? I think over the years I've started to realize that remittances are going to continue to flow to the continent, and that's not going to stop. Nobody's going to stop me from sending money. My parents are passed away many years ago, but family members who are in need. That will continue, but I do believe that's not scalable. If we really want to make change, and we want to make change on the continent quickly, we need to really go beyond remittances, and we can. It really is looking beyond our ethnicity, the borders, wherever we come from, and say, where is the opportunity? Who can I invest in? What can I invest in? The diaspora needs to be part of it. Otherwise, to ask for other people to change the systems in the continent that is so difficult at times to capture, it's not going to work. I think the diaspora needs to be a part of it. And we're very lucky, from the United States to the European countries and others, they are all looking up to the diaspora to partner with them, to work with them to make things happen. So we really are excited about this convening. This booklet that you see is also a part of the one-year journey of ADN on Beyond Remittances. We were not just going to speak about we were going to do something, and this, of course this is a journey. If you ask me, what did you do? I have no idea. But I know one thing, we have been bringing people together. We are creating awareness. For change to happen, first you have to bring people together, you have to create awareness, and then comes the action. This is where we are. We are really in the activating of the diaspora and mobilizing of the diaspora. This is just to share with you that we're working on it, and the conversation will continue at the African Diaspora Investment Symposium. We started last year at the African Leaders Summit with Denise and Anna Marie and everyone from the State Department. And thank you for making that happen. We have a great partnership with the US government. We will continue to have that partnership, which I'll speak about that a little bit afterwards. But right now it's my great privilege to ask Kadi to just say a few words about why we're doing this.
Where do I start? I know Almaz and all of the wonderful brilliant African individuals in the diaspora and Friends of Africa call this remittances, and I call it a black tax. So we're talking about the investment from all of us that has been going for years, or maybe decades actually, more than that, to invest in communities. And as an African, as a person of African descent standing in this room, it's because of remittances that I'm here. I came to the United States as a refugee, and it's through the support, the financial support of individuals in my community that allowed my family to survive first and then make it to America. And today I stand in front of you representing an organization, the King Baldwin Foundation US, that has dedicated about 20 years of its existence facilitating resources, philanthropic resources, to social entrepreneurship and social impact organizations across the world with a very strong focus on Africa, me serving in that capacity. So it's an honor to be here. And the African Diaspora Network is home to me. Almaz is a sister. And the vision and values and mission that the African Diaspora represents, not only for the King Baldwin Foundation US, but for me personally, it's continuously finding a platform, a space, a way for us to get our resources together. Africa has too many problems, lots of opportunities, beautiful in all her complexities. We need to get together and act. What could that mean is this is one way to figure that out, what that action is. How do we come together as Africans and friends of Africa? We can't do this alone, so thank you all for being here. To act on pulling our heads together, but our financials together, and make sure that programs, individuals, communities that have traction in reducing suffering for millions of people can actually happen. And in my lower capacity at KBF US, I do this every day. I talk to African entrepreneurs, I talk to US donors that are interested in these incredible leaders, incredible resilient communities, but it takes a village to raise a child. And Almaz is our village, and I hope we all get together and then give her the support that she needs, even though for me it's a black tax, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for what you represent. You're not alone. We're all here with you. We have incredible leaders. I'm thinking of Moki. Shout out to Moki at Africa Filter. We're all doing this, changing the narrative, but it takes action, as we said. So I'll leave it there, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kadi is a true sister. I can actually do a lot of different things with her, and so thank you so much, Kadi. Now, it is an incredible honor for me to introduce the Honorable Ms. Bridget Robinson. She is the coordinator of Prosper Africa. She is the coordinator of Prosper Africa at the presidential level, National Security Initiative to strengthen the strategic and economic partnership between the United States and African countries. I actually had the greatest privilege listening and hearing to you and Meg Whitman, the ambassador to Kenya, this last Friday in San Francisco. I could not have been prouder. as an African, as a diasporan, as an American, to hear what the United States commitment is to the diaspora. You said it very well. And what I am saying to all of us here from the diaspora is it behooves us to work with the governments that we belong to. For us, it really is important for us to work with the US government, and for many years, we have been partnering with the State Department, with USAID, and now with the Prosper Africa. Under your leadership, we look forward to supporting you, and we look forward to hearing what Prosper Africa is and how the diaspora can be a part of. So thank you, and the stage is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Almaz, thank you so much for hosting today, and thank you to the African Diaspora Network. I believe a former colleague may or may not be here, Thomas DeBas from the State Department. Thomas has been really on the forefront of leading U.S. government's work and investment and dedication to the African Diaspora Network. And I think his colleague is here, and frankly, Prosper Africa stands on his shoulders. I know that from being a former State Department person as well. In my new role, I'm about 30 days in. I look forward to deepening our relationship at Prosper with the Global Partnerships Initiative. I also want to just give a little shout out to Denise Laurent. Denise has been a huge supporter of mine in 30 short days, and I look forward to working with her a bit more. So thank you again for being here. I am British Robinson, as Alma said. I'm thrilled to be here in my new role as Prosper Africa Coordinator. I'd like to also acknowledge others that are here in the audience as well, any dignitaries or country representatives, all protocols observed. I'm also delighted to welcome business leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs, particularly those of the diaspora here today, and tell you a little bit more about how we can extend our engagement on the continent beyond remittances. So Unga 78 is one of my first events in my new role as coordinator, being appointed by President Biden. So I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about Prosper Africa. As Alma said, it's a presidential and a national security initiative to strengthen the strategic and economic partnership between U.S. and African countries by catalyzing two-way trade and investment. This is a bit of a sea change because we're going beyond traditional aid to actual investment and trade. And there's a significant opportunity for the African diaspora community to be a part of this effort. And we'd like to go beyond remittances. Our role at Prosper is not just two-way trade and investment, but to do it on an exponential scale, to aggregate, to replicate remarkable new financial models that are changing the way business is done in Africa. Our goal is to achieve not just economic growth, but human impact. We also want to help Africa become healthier and wealthier. Africa's future is being written today, and we have the opportunity to be a part of that story. My goal is also to make sure Americans, and in particular the African diaspora in America, has the tools, relationships, and ability to write themselves into that story. And let me explain what that looks like. In today's global economy, Africa's nations are carving out an increasingly substantial role, propelled by rising household incomes and consumption trends, the rapid rise in digital and mobile accessibility, the diminishing infrastructure gap, and Africa's readiness for widespread industrialization are reshaping its economic profile. By all accounts, Africa is rising into a $1 trillion consumer market. As of 2020, the continent has 6 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies, and the rate of return on foreign investment is higher in Africa than any other region in the world. By 2040, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world, larger than China and India combined. Africa's GDP is expected to be $29 trillion by 2050. If you're an investor, a member of the diaspora community, you can certainly wait until 2050 or 2040, but at that point, the train will have left the station. There are risks to doing business in Africa, both real and perceived, but we would argue perceived more perceived than real. It's no different than any other emerging market, and Prosper Africa is here to help change that narrative, and we need all of you to help us change that narrative. The continent offers growth and scale, abundant resources, tech-savvy youth culture, commitment to building climate-resilient infrastructure, and a reputation for leapfrogging productivity. The energy and momentum on the continent is pervasive. The continent is driving innovation and offers the world's fastest rate of entrepreneurship. African diasporas encompass about 50 million African Americans and nearly 2 million African immigrants who maintain close familial, social, and economic connections to the continent. In fact, the African Union includes the global African diaspora as Africa's 6th region. So why aren't more U.S. diaspora-owned companies doing business in Africa? With you, we hope to change that. We can introduce you to investors, to trustworthy partners, and help you learn about promising projects to invest in. We help diaspora businesses navigate a full suite of tools and instruments offered by 17 U.S. government agencies that I have the job to coordinate. So I really need your help, 17. We help diaspora businesses. For example, we've invested in 9 African asset funds under a catalytic investment facility that will mobilize over $600 million on the continent to fuel Africa innovation and entrepreneurship. Another example, and the CEO is here today, Terry Wanwanji, are you here? Terry, are you here? He's not here yet. I was told he was going to be here. We're grateful for his partnership and its incredible model. Terry is the CEO. We facilitated a massive deal recently with Sebastian, a diaspora-owned cybersecurity firm, to partner with Cisco Systems on a major contract in Niger, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Congo, Brazzaville. Great. Benin, Cameroon, totaling $858 million. What did Prosper Africa do? We worked with Terry and Cisco. We brought a U.S. ICT company together to crowdsource in private funding to support his business. And we can do that for each of you. $858 million worth of grants in those countries. These deals aim to bolster extension of digital platforms with robust cybersecurity protection and will be a driver for economic development investment and organizational transparency and human capacity building. In Nigeria, diaspora-owned Ashipa Electric deploys renewable-based microgrids to help homeowners and businesses reduce energy costs, thereby stimulating economic activity, and is poised to positively impact millions of lives. Today, they've deployed solutions across 3 of the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria and now positively impact over 10,000 people with a clear path to expand over 100 times in the next 3 to 5 years. Prosper Africa's support of diaspora-led companies like Ashipa and Sebastian is well-focused and strategic. We also have led the Global Diversity Export Initiative, a recent trade mission in South Africa, Ghana, and Nigeria a couple of weeks ago, and we hope to do more with all of you as partners in the Africa Diaspora Network. It makes good business sense, but it also makes right sense, and it's also about the future. In fact, Prosper Africa is now working directly on over 30 two-way trade and investment transactions, building supply, aggregating supply. For example, a diaspora-owned Shea Radiance, we're aggregating her business to help actually produce and supply Whole Foods and Wegmans. Some examples for you to get your heads around. We've reached a tipping point in our commercial relationships with Africa, and it's time to move beyond aid, beyond remittances, and truly invest. And we can't think of a better network to engage with to do so. We must build enduring trade and investment linkages today, or risk being left out of Africa's future. The Africa continent presents an almost limitless opportunities for doing business, and we can't do it without you. When you partner with Prosper Africa, we're there to support you from deal sourcing to bringing new limited partners, using tools to de-risk the transactions. We help bring the transactions to fruition. Getting the deal done is what matters. We are committed to partnering with you, to unlocking capital and supporting your businesses so that you can invest alongside us and give back to your countries. I look forward to some deal making. I look forward to meeting all of you and working with you as we further enhance our two-way trade and investment priorities within the United States government. Thank you.
My name is Josh Stein. I'm the board chairman for African Diaspora Network. Originally from Eritrea, same place as Alma's. But I spent most of my career in the pharma healthcare industry. I was with Pfizer and then 13 years with J&J as the chief technology officer. I left in 2019 to actually start a venture studio. And the reason for that was when I was at J&J, we started a program called the Africa Innovation Challenge. This is healthcare related, but we would send a challenge to startups across Africa, fully funded by J&J, no equity dilution. So they were actually putting the money to encourage more entrepreneurship. And we started this actually off of, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but there was a program started called the Next Einstein Forum. And this was with the National Academy of Science in the US. A lot of different organizations got involved worldwide. The first meeting was in Senegal, and I was asked to be a judge for startups. And that's how we're like, well, why can't we scale this? So I went back to J&J and asked them to fund it, and they're still doing it actually after I left. But off of that, we started to see the gaps. When we see startups in Africa, are they getting the right mentorship? Are they connected to the right investors? How do they get credibility with investors? So that's part of the reason why I left and started a venture studio. We work both in the US and using Africa as a resource to some extent. To give an example, since we started this, we recently invested into a company started by a woman from Chad, who was a Harvard grad, a lawyer from Harvard that actually used to run L'Oreal's travel business, basically, the travel retail. And what she's doing is, in Chad, I don't know if anybody's from Chad, most women in Chad have very long, very thick hair. And she figured why that is the case, and if you're not familiar, there's actually a story done on her by Vogue magazine recently. They went to Chad with her and did the full story of the history of why women in Chad have great hair. And basically, she took that ingredient and brought it, and now it's actually, we're manufacturing in France, we're bringing it to the US. We just launched here in the US, in New York City, actually at the Detox Market. So that's the kinds of connections that we're trying to create is, how do we fund them? How do we actually, and by the way, this is not charity, just to be very clear. And I think this is going to continue to be important as we talk about, yes, remittances are going to continue. There are ways to leverage remittances even better than what we're doing today. But on top of that, how do we mobilize the whole diaspora to actually be part of it, not only from an investment, but also from a human capital perspective? So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I think it's very exciting to see that this is actually picking up. I think the Biden administration, the recent meetings that has happened, has been great, and I think there's significant opportunities. And I think to your point, where investment in Africa actually returns, there's a family office, and I live in Princeton, New Jersey, and there's a family office that recently, they sent me an email saying they were the first investors in Andela. Think about it, and they just exited when Facebook invested. Their return was 21x. So whatever they invested, they got 21 times more money than what they did. And so that's what we're trying to build, that narrative, that story, that there are actually pockets happening. And how do we actually highlight that and get the diaspora to be part of the spokesperson to all the entrepreneurs that exist in Africa? So with that, I think what I'm going to do is I'll ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and the topic and why they're passionate about the topic that we've selected. And then we'll ask some questions after that. So Denise, do you want to get started?
Sure. So Denise Garnett-Manty, Special Advisor on our Youth Africa Leaders Summit implementation at the State Department. Prior to that, I was Director for Africa at the White House National Security Council, also working on the Africa Leader Summit. And so I now have the interesting role of making sure that all the announcements we made, we're actually keeping up with our announcements, and the administration is actually doing a good job to ensure that we keep up with our commitments. So it's been a pretty interesting opportunity working with several partners across the U.S. government, but of course our African partners in the private sector and of course the public sector as well. And as you all know, we partnered with ADN during the summit to host a diaspora event. And I think for us, as our moderator said, this administration has put a very significant emphasis on elevating diaspora engagement. And I think at the summit that was on display for the first time, we hosted an African Diaspora Young Leaders Forum, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but the president made an announcement and signed an executive order on our diaspora engagement. And so it's something that I have been working really closely on, been an integral part of the sausage-making bureaucratic process to put something like that together. But so far, I think it's coming along really well, and I look forward to talking more about the council and more about the administration's work on elevating our diaspora engagement, during our conversation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Pedro Vasconcelos, I'm the manager of the financing facility for remittances at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. That's an IFI of the United Nations, working on agricultural development and rural development. You might wonder, why do we work on this? Why we work both on remittances and diaspora investment? Simply put, is the fact that the biggest investments, be it in Africa, Latin America, or in Asia, are not ODA. I mean, sometimes you can even add, for most of the cases, FDI to that number, and you still have a figure that is lower than what migrants send, be it $200 at a time on remittances, or through the investments that they make. And in rural areas, nothing beats it. And this is why 20 years ago, if I started looking into this phenomenon. As I mentioned, we're in an IFI, there's a lot of loans to the government to try to promote rural development. But we've been working on this, both on this issue of remittances and diaspora since then. And at the UN, we're leading two processes. One of them is the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development, so these two topics. And we're very glad for ADN's participation. This year just happened. That blue little brochure that you saw are the findings that were shared with all member states for this Unga. And also we're supporting International Day of Family Remittances. The whole point here is how can we make migrant contributions count more? Being remittances, I just want to say one thing. It sounds maybe sometimes, but when we say beyond remittances, that the job is done. Remittances will just continue. Remittances are being, the aspect of remittances, which is the biggest development impact, they're the biggest contributors to the achievement of the SDGs at family level, because that's why remittances are sent, to basically allow families to achieve their own SDGs, period, is still done extremely inefficiently. That's my point. The potential for financial inclusion is fantastic, and it's not yet met. That's one discussion. Diaspora, as we'll discuss, I think, next, the potential is enormous. $500 billion, it's actually $600 billion in remittances go to the developing world every year. Migrants abroad and diasporas have accumulated the same amount in savings, yet that is not invested. So just look at those figures. We have $1 trillion in just in investment, and that could be basically made stronger. How can we support that? How can we make it easier? And the things that I will share some examples and challenges, because we need to address the challenges, not just the dream of let's make it happen, is what are the challenges that we need to address in order to make this a reality?
So Ali Diallo, I'm a managing director of the Prime Fund, which is a $150 million fund launched in partnership with LG Electronics in the Bay Area. So we're an early stage fund, so we invest in startups around the areas of SDGs, mostly digital health, clean energy as well. And I've been an entrepreneur all my life, so I started my career actually in fintech, launching remittance companies. So the team is very fitting for me because this is exactly going beyond remittance and trying to really leverage private capital and leveraging PPPs to really support the diaspora. Prior to launching the fund with LG, I was the White House Presidential Innovation Fellow under the previous administration, supporting the veterans on the fintech side. Again, a very strong team around fintech and remittance, and also supporting the MCC. And I was also head of global programs at MIT for several years, really supporting and building bridges between Africa and MIT. So we launched MIT Africa in Nigeria, in Senegal, in a few other places, Kenya as well. And I was also a mentor supporting entrepreneurs. As a mentor and an investor, I was able to wear both hats fairly easily. So really tapping into a double expertise to really support and drive capital on the continent. And as an entrepreneur, I started a couple of companies. About 10 of them, 2 were acquired. One is still active out of Dubai, so we have a large investment firm out of Dubai investing across Africa. Ethiopia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and mostly around energy, clean energy, telecom as well. And yeah, really excited about the opportunity to build bridges between the West and Africa, and now also with Asia as well, and figuring out the right model. So we bring a lot of companies from Europe, from France, Senegalese American. So I also tap into my cultural expertise and experience, connecting different pockets of capital that are usually not thought about, and really using a blended finance approach to really deploy capital across Africa. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Great, thank you, Ad. Just very quickly, each of you would love to hear what's missing. What's happening in terms of, yes, I think remittances, families are going to continue to send money to their families. Obviously, there's other things that could be done in that space because how do you create a return on that money? But more interesting, how do we address this gap that exists, which is how do you create confidence to get diasporans to actually help the continent? How do we help startups? How do we encourage that entrepreneurship? What do you think is the gap that exists today that's preventing it from being, so we don't have to discuss about it, we just have to do it?
I'll start. I think on the U.S. government side, British mentioned that we have 17 U.S. government agencies, and so a lot of times it's very confusing in terms of, where do you go, how do you get support assistance, and one of the gaps that, I saw when I was working on the Africa Leader Summit was that there's a lot of diaspora engagement happening, lots of things happening, I think ADN, other organizations, but there's not a concentrated effort to really bring a lot of this together and really institutionalize the work that's currently going on, whether it's remittances, whether it's investment. And I think particularly on the government side, it's very rare to see the government take a stand to have a formal mechanism to really engage the diaspora. And so that was one of the reasons why we came up with this Presidential Advisory Council to engage the diaspora, was really to bring a group of experts together across different sectors, whether it was sports, trade and investment, fintech, academia, et cetera, to really advise the president, right? For the United States, our African diaspora is a source of strength. And so how can we leverage the diaspora when it comes to engaging in our U.S. foreign policy, whether it is a situation of crisis on the continent, whether it's about increasing participation of the diaspora in trade and investment opportunities, increasing educational exchange programs. Many of you know our Young Africa Youth Initiative, our YALI program. It's a great program, and many times we've talked about a reverse YALI, right? So we bring African students to the U.S. We can also look at bringing some HBCU students to the continent, right? And so how can we institutionalize such programs where we're really leveraging our government expertise and creating platforms, initiatives, opportunities to engage the diaspora, whether it's education, trade investment, remittances, and really use the government as a source of I think, a resource, right, to kind of bring these ideas together. And so, I think on the U.S. government side, you'll see more of that once we launch the council. The announcement was made at the summit in December and we're, if not days or weeks away from the announcement. And so we're really excited about how far we've come with putting the council together. I think once it's launched, you'll see more U.S. government involvement in our diaspora engagement. You know, ADN has been a partner with the State Department for over a decade now, a great partner through our Global Partnerships Bureau at the State Department, and has done an amazing job. And so we're looking to do more of that to scale, more partnerships, and also working with our government agencies to actually do more to increase the investment and increase public-private partnerships.
I think that's a great point. It's interesting, we're working on the strategic plan for the next 5 years for ADN right now. And we had a big discussion around how do we link the African American community and the African market? Because we're doing able with startups in the healthcare space, finance, education, agriculture, which are the 4 areas that we tend to focus. How do we get the startups even in Africa, here in the US, how do we open up the African market for them and vice versa, basically? So we do think there's a big opportunity there. And if you could deploy the diasporan brain power on top of that, I think it could change a lot of things. Pedro, I know we talked about the report. We'd love to hear more. There were specific 3 recommendations made in there. We'd love to hear your point of view and also what you think is the gap that exists today.
Sure. How to summarize it? The good thing is that I'm very positive about it, meaning there's a solution. We've been working on this for some time. And if you ask me what might be the problem sometimes is maybe the misunderstanding that exists around this. When do we start talking about diaspora? When do we stop saying migrants? So I will use this interchangeably. This is something that we've noticed in trying to get things operational through the programs at IFAD, be it targeting migrants sending remittances or diaspora investors. We pretty soon came to the conclusion that we use the word diaspora, but what do we picture? We picture a Somali doctor that actually would like to invest 10,000 minimum back home, or are we talking about a Malian that might want to pay 50 euros but contribute to the development of his community back home? Both exist. We work with both of those, but you cannot offer the same product to the same. That's maybe the first thing. So the first recommendation that I think is clear is know your diaspora that you're working with or the one you belong to. It's imperative that you do that you get the right information about this. So basically, you're providing really the customers in between. The second thing is we talk about investment like if it was very easy. If you try to put a crowdfunding platform right now for Senegal, you're going to have a list of regulatory issues that you will not be able to face unless you put a lot of serious money on the table, particularly for the migrants. So there's an enabling environment. Issues might sound boring. This has been a barrier. You need to address that. More attention, more funds need to go into that direction. The other one is customized investment models based on diaspora profiles, as we say. Let's not always talk about the C-suite. There's angel investors. It's fantastic what they've been able to, but there's so many from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia that are investing. What about the other mainstream diaspora investor that wants to contribute at their level of their means? Because the numbers, when you start aggregating that, is huge. And the desire to invest is equally important. Do we have models and models that can basically fit their capacity or their financial capability? That's extremely important. The other, I have 2 more on this, and this is based on 70 projects that we finance from pilots to scale. The other one is what we're seeing, the elephant in the room right now is their contribution, particularly for climate. As I mentioned, IFA is working mainly in rural areas. The investments that both migrants and diaspora are doing addressing climate adaptation is incredible. It surpasses, again, many of the programs. They just don't know that they're doing climate adaptation. Well, they just invested in an irrigation system in their village that wins the lottery right now. I would like to invest, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of services and many doors opening to have your investment. Can we facilitate that? I'm making an example, very bright example, just to try to illustrate a bit what we're seeing. And I finish with this. this worked, and I'm very, very proud to be at this table because when we started looking at this, we partnered with the State Department. Thomas DePass is not here today, but we were discussing and says, let's launch something, and IFAD and the State Department launched the DIA program. And we said to ourselves, let's do this in Somalia. Of all places, it was very difficult. IFAD was not able to put the funds for investment there. The EU was not able to actually send the money for a grant. How are we going to make the Somali diaspora invest? Well, we succeeded. 1 million investment generated in less than a year, twice investment from the diaspora, all sorts, and investment in mainly in fisheries, agriculture. It created hundreds of jobs just by this investment. This was just a proof that it can be done efficiently, and that was really an eye opener. There's more to the story, but this is what these programs are showcasing, not only to the diaspora and governments on the other side, but also back home, because the lack of understanding also of governments, of countries of origin is crucial as well. They need to see that the diaspora not only contributes on their remittances, but their investments. How can we facilitate that? There's a lot of work that needs to be done as well in that regard. I'll really stop.
No, that's perfect. Almas, you got to take a lot of notes because the strategic plan is being written right on this table. Mainly because yeah.
Two things he mentioned that are very critical. One is the concept of KYD, which is a spin-off of KYC for remittance. So instead of knowing just your customer, knowing your diaspora, right? Which is very, very critical for what we want to do. I was actually chatting with my brother yesterday about that. We're working on building a new telecom connectivity opportunity for Congo, for DRC. And when it came to the fundraising, we were discussing whether or not we should involve the diaspora or do it as a PPP or as a fully private investment opportunity or tap into some of the funding we have from the UAE. And we talked about building a potential diaspora fund, right? And he threw it out and said, we have so many resources, right, from the diaspora. Why don't we have a fund that is fueled by the diaspora and investing into projects that are very dear to the community? And we quickly realized that the diaspora needs to be further defined, right? Because the same product cannot apply to a Somalian doctor or to one of my friends who's working at the local shop, right? So I think we need to really start creating sophisticated products, building the right infrastructure. So if it's a fund, for instance, or investment platform, or even a crowdfunding, there needs to be an education component for the right diaspora here. When it comes to even understanding how the returns on that investment would be made, right? So KYD, as I like to call it, is really critical when you start about think about involving the diaspora for Africa. And then you also mentioned something about pilots and trying to go beyond pilots, which is also critical. When we build our funds under Clear Impact with LG, we try to go beyond passive investments and really thinking about way to bring a global commercial acceleration so that when entrepreneurs get an opportunity to deploy their solutions, they also have a pathway to scale massively and exponentially. The diaspora is global, so we never look at it from a very isolated area, whether it's the North American region or Sub-Saharan Africa or Europe or Asia. The way we build our funds is really from a global perspective, and that helps a lot because not only do you provide the funding for the right entrepreneurs, but you also de-risk their opportunities by enabling them with a way to scale much faster. And I think I see our friend Thomas, who just arrived. And we were talking, I was with Thomas yesterday at another event. We were talking about global commercial acceleration in Ethiopia when it comes to connectivity. So I think that's the key thing as well. Really having a holistic view when it comes to investing. It's not just about the capital, the cash itself. As a matter of fact, we talk about 4 types of capital. In our case, it's relational, Africans are very social, right? So there is value there in that, social connectivity element, right? So the question is, how do you monetize that as well, for the greater good? So there is relational capital that is as critical as financial capital, and then you have the, obviously the technology capital, the IP that you bring. If you don't have it on the ground, figuring out a model to enable other companies, other corporations, whether it's LG, Samsung, Google, right, large corporates to come and support the entrepreneurs as well. And then the last one is experiential capital, which is really this commercial acceleration opportunity to scale.
Yeah, and that leads to my next question, actually. Where do we see the opportunities on public-private partnerships? Where do we see some of the gaps? I think to your point, it's interesting, being at J&J, it was very easy to convince people to say, hey, we need to do something. Because everybody talks about Africa, but they're not sure what to do. By the way, this is true for every big corporation in the US. So we've been talking about all these companies have a lot of diasporans in their organization. So how do we actually deploy that and the Friends of Africa that exists in those companies? So it would be interesting to hear, Denise, about your thoughts about the public-private partnership. How do we engage the Google, Facebook of the world? I know they're starting to some extent, but it's almost somebody has to push it every time, giving them that credibility. And for us at ADN, this is actually something we're putting a lot of focus, which is how do we mobilize? Because a lot of times the African diaspora is also broken down into, well, I'm from Nigeria, I'm from Ethiopia, but the reality of it is they all want to do something for the continent, not just for their own country. So how do we actually aggregate all these resources to be able to do it? And to give you an example, Almaz and I are leaving for Senegal in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And this is a concept off of what happened at COVID, which is why shouldn't Africa manufacture its own vaccines? Why shouldn't Africa manufacture its own diagnostic testing that they didn't have access during that process? But the reality is they don't have to create all of that from scratch. It's through partnerships that need to happen. And how do we deploy those experts that exist, especially in the US, into those? And that's actually where we're going to spend all of our time, is to bring those entrepreneurs that are thinking about manufacturing in Africa. How do we bring those partnerships? Who's the people that have done it here in the US before, to see where we take that? But we'd love to hear the public-private partnership.
Now I'll put Thomas on the spot again. He's our diaspora superstar. Thomas DeVos has been spearheading our diaspora engagement for several years now, and we truly owe him a lot. As I always say, when no one was thinking about diaspora engagement in the U.S. government, Thomas DeVos was thinking about diaspora engagement in the U.S. government. But I think, for me, you mentioned, I think, mobilizing, and I think that's really key. Mobilizing it from the community level to the government level is really key for a public-private partnership. And also, I always say there's diversity, inclusion, and representation, right? We are able to elevate our diaspora engagement on a government level because of the diversity that we have with people who are in government, people like Thomas, et cetera. I lived in Ghana, my parents are from Ghana, and so I have that understanding of, I think the importance of diaspora engagement, right, from home. And so I have a unique set of experiences that I think I can bring to the table. So I would say diversity, inclusion, and representation is key, right, to elevating our diaspora engagement, and also working with public-private partners like the Googles, et cetera. I think it's equally important. And then looking at how we can really mobilize the community. One thing about the diaspora is, as you want to know, a secret, it can be a little, divided, is what I would say, among the diaspora in the United States, right? And I think, we've gotten to a place where we're looking at ways to really, I think, unify the diaspora in different ways, whether it's African immigrants, whether it's African Americans. You notice that, and I went through a series of debates when we were writing the executive order. Is the diaspora just African American? Is it African immigrant? But it's inclusive, right? It's inclusive. The African Union has a very inclusive definition of the diaspora, and I think we should place a more concentrated effort on community engagement and mobilizing the diaspora at that level, while we also increase our public-private partnerships on the government and, of course, the executive level as well.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I can add quickly. So partnerships is at the heart of everything we do as African diaspora members, I believe. It has to be the heart because you cannot do everything by yourself. You cannot really scale alone, right? So I made it a conscious effort to really build everything that my team and I are involved around partnership. And so the funds that we launch, the entrepreneurs that we support, the startups, we really scale and create this global commercial acceleration platform through PPPs and through partnerships. So we're doing it here in the US with different states, tapping into state partnerships to deploy large-scale solutions in collaboration with the Black diaspora, so Africans and African Americans. And we're doing it across Africa, in Ethiopia, and other places as well, and the UAE as well. So I think if we can somehow highlight those examples of successful PPPs that have been deployed by the diaspora to inspire others to do the same, because it's very hard for an entrepreneur to come up with the right model right away by themselves. They need guidance, and that's why even though we invest, we always try to go back to mentoring and supporting the local community. We have investors from the African diaspora members that have launched their own funds as early fund managers. I think I see one of them in the audience, Eunice, if she's still here. It's basically, building fund alone without necessarily the right type of support. And they're doing it great, right? They are actually exceeding the expectations. But it would be great to highlight how you could take an early stage fund manager from the diaspora, from Guinea, from Congo, and expose such a leader to PPPs, right? Because we tend to think of PPPs from a different mindset than we do when we deploy venture capital or private equity funding. And that goes back to this blended finance approach, right? We have to look at a more holistic approach when it comes to deploying solutions. So PPPs is the heart of everything, and that involves, activating, not just leveraging, but activating the right type of government resources to support the communities and bring the private sectors into it. So pointing to those models, and we had a lot of those at MIT, through the Legal Center, where we try to take the learnings that we saw from entrepreneurs in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Ethiopia, in Senegal, and really disseminating that knowledge for other entrepreneurs from the diaspora. So I think we need to find a way, a platform to really showcase how this can be done, because there is a lot of desire to support and learn more on how to activate public-private partnerships, but not all the investors that have access to the one type of capital know how to do that. So.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be short. No, actually, one of the biggest contributions from IFA is that we added a P to the PPP, basically public-private and people's partnership. Because we often think about the public sector, the private sector, the companies, but the diaspora, as I said, might go from an angel investor to a migrant that would like to contribute in his own way, with his own means. So we put the P, actually after the famous program that I mentioned that we did with Shurako as part of the DM initiative. Now you're here, that will echo. But a lot of lessons learned from that, the importance of that partnership, and understand really the role that each should play. Most often what we see is asking the private sector or impact investment funds to be very social in the sense of not thinking with a business approach to this, and that just doesn't work. The same thing is to say, just because you're the diaspora, you're going to take all the risk. We're going to make you bear all the risks. There's no return. Let's not push it. The beautiful thing about diaspora, we often make the analogy, impact investors and diaspora, at least I make it, is that the impact investors would like to have a return on investment, but also some social impact. And oftentimes the diaspora is just the opposite, the order. It's the same ingredients, but the order is, I want to make something, I want to have an impact back home, but also I would like it to be sustainable, because these are hard-earned funds. So how come for the impact investment world, everything is followed to the letter? We have big symposiums on this, and but when we look at the diaspora, it doesn't exist. This is something that Alma and I have been very keen on changing, and we will, because the potential and the funds are there and are even bigger. So this starts with this partnerships, absolutely. The role, the understanding for governments, be it in the US or in Africa, for instance, if we're talking about this corridor, what we should know, the KYD, absolutely. We borrow that from that analogy of remittances, but it is crucial for both governments, as you say very well, to understand the diaspora, that is for Africa, for instance, or even one country, what segment, what product for what segment of the population. I mean, if you're in the private sector, that's what you're going to do. You're going to see who your customers are and address or create products for them, for that profile. It's exactly the same thing. It's very simple, yet not done, if you think of it. So these, I think, are one of the things. The models are growing. I mentioned from pilot to scale. There's models of crowdfunding that will touch a certain segment of the population, of the diaspora population, American population. You have diaspora bonds. You've heard a lot of that. I'm sure you're following this agenda. Some work, some others didn't, but it is a promising, makes it much easier. Buy the bond, that's it. You contribute it. Or there's something that is much more, high tech, high touch, we can say. Not all diasporas are entrepreneurs. Migration is a very entrepreneurial act, but let's not make that assumption that because we're migrants and we have funds, we want to be entrepreneurs, we are good entrepreneurs. I am not a good entrepreneur. I'm talking to fine people here, but I don't think I am an entrepreneur to that level. So my point is, let's also make sure that we address these nuances. And one of the things that I would, just from the experience of IFAD, that we are trying to promote is particularly investment in small and medium enterprises. This is something that we're trying to get instrument models, as I say, from funds to crowdfunding to allow the diaspora to address this, because from our surveys, that's why we're seeing a lot of interest from the diaspora in their communities. It's true, Africa, supporting Africa is there, but oftentimes it's also not only my country, but my community of origin, where I would like to see the impact, I would like to see employment, I would like to see small and medium enterprise survive and maintain. We saw that a lot after the COVID crisis. And a lot of desire from the diaspora, for instance, the example of Mali, to invest, yet the vehicles were not there to address. That's almost a capital crime, I believe. That you want the diaspora to invest and you don't have the instruments. So that's one is good.
Great, thank you. I think I'm going to open it up because we'd love to have a discussion with everybody here. So,
Thanks.
yeah, there's another one then.
Okay, is that on now?
Yeah.
Great. Just a couple of comments. First of all, I really appreciate the panel, and maybe I'll just add a little bit more color and context to the role of Prosper Africa and why I think it's so important to be engaged in this conversation with all of you. The first thing is part of my vision as the new coordinator, is to really double down on investing in crowding and funding for SMEs and VCs and bringing in that early stage capital. So it's us on behalf of the U.S. government. Any tool that we need, including grant tools or being that junior funder in a blended finance model, is Prosper. So please come to us. That's number one. Number two, and then we can provide grants that can do the capacity building that you were talking about, so that we create systemic and structural change and ultimate impact. So we're not just doing it temporarily, but we're actually leaving something behind. We're actually creating those capital markets at the table. The second point that I want to make on the Diaspora Fund, I've only been on board 30 days, but I thought about it on day 3 as part of our new strategy. I mentioned, you may have not caught this, but we have invested in 9 catalytic asset managers on the continent of Africa. They're all African. And we are capacitating them and building their capacity to then be able to look at, do the due diligence, and fund the projects that you're talking about. We're happy to link you to those 9 asset managers and figure out what the best fit might be.
And then out of that, my thought is, I can talk offline to Tomas and to Denise, but do we create some sort of consortium that becomes the diaspora fund from that investment that we just made in the last couple of months? The other piece I want to raise is Google. You were talking about African founders. I was just on the tour with Amal's with Ambassador Whitman from Kenya, and we met the CEOs of Apple, Google, Intel, and Cisco. And we didn't know this, but Google has a $100 million African founders fund. If we can crowd in more money, we'll be meeting with Google soon. What if we can help double that to 200 million, 300 million? I don't have a lot to work with, but what I can do is leverage those dollars from the private sector. So some of it's classic investments, and some of it's going to be broader in the partnership PPP space. And then the last piece I'll mention is something that I launched early this morning with a large institutional asset manager called Mercer. I know all of you probably know Mercer. A new project called CIX. It's a platform. Typically, this is an instrument that a government would do, or one of the DFIs or the UN, but there's a platform they're going to put on to basically do matchmaking. So you have projects, investment projects, that you want funded, matchmake with the investors, global investors. So this is an opportunity for us to put the African diaspora literally on the global market. We just launched it this morning. It's a bit of a pilot. This is a good way. Pilot in a good way, not in a bad way. It's going to be focused on climate change, climate transition, climate adaptation jobs, projects, etc. We hope to broaden that across the sector, looking at solar, wind, you name it, geothermal, broaden it, hopefully even going into ag, but we'll pilot it now. We didn't have that instrument. We don't have it amongst those 17 agencies. So to have our partner like Mercer create this for us, it's a huge advantage for the U.S. government, but it allows us to do more with the diaspora community. So sorry that was long, but I wanted to make sure, I think it's really important that you understand the assets and the support that we can be to this network. And I see my number one role as being of service to the 17 agencies and to this network that is so critical for Prosper to prosper. So thank you.
If I can comment just for 1 second, because this is very compelling. A lot of American investors have access to a lot of capital, not just here in the US, but also in the UAE, in other places. And I represent some of them that have access to massive amount of capital that they would like to deploy in Africa, not necessarily in social projects, but in projects that combine a double bottom line, so profit and purpose, right? But the trust issue is something that is sometimes not necessarily preventing the investments from happening, but definitely slowing the investment process. So I think that's where the US government could play a big role in providing that trust and stability structure, right, to put some of those large-scale investors at ease. And we've been doing it on the private side, and also when I was part of the US government, we worked on building those bridges, and even on the educational side with MIT. So we address those challenges pretty much all our lives. But having the US government come and really be that stakeholder, so it's not necessarily about the capital sometimes. We have access to a lot of capital that we can mobilize and channel, right? But going in with the US government, with the different agencies would be very helpful. I actually met with your team, I think last month in DC, and they mentioned exactly what you were discussing about the platform. So we can really create this consortium approach where you mobilize resources from Asia, from the GCC region, from Europe, from the US, and bring all of that through different platforms with the US government acting as one of the trust agents alongside the leaders of the African diaspora. So thank you for that.
Yeah, there's a question right there.
It's more a comment than a question. So hi everyone, and thanks for I only heard about this network when I was planning to be in Unga this week. My name is Ebera Kereke. I'm the CEO of Africa Public Health Foundation. So I come here from Nairobi this week. I'm a public health physician, and until I took on this role a few months ago, I've been an advisor to the Leadership of Africa Centers for Disease Control. And you have all talked about the opportunity for the diaspora to support health, and we do know that a significant amount of remittances goes towards enabling access to healthcare for families across the continent. And as you mentioned, it's not necessarily the most efficient way for those funds to be used. Also, in support, one of the barriers to businesses being established across the continent is access to healthcare. People don't want to live somewhere where they can't be assured of good quality care. So, having a good public health system that's able to develop resilient and effective health services is a necessity for development. And if anybody had any doubts about that, the COVID pandemic has put paid to any illusions. You cannot have development if there isn't health. So that's a long-winded introduction to my particular interest in how we engage with the diaspora and the opportunities for investment. Yes, we know that a lot of African governments have not invested as they should do in their health systems, and there's been an over-reliance on investment from donor countries, philanthropies, and foundations, usually international ones, for our core health systems. The challenge is that a lot of those aid-funded programs are vertical programs. So you have your HIV program, you have your TB program, you have your malaria program. What they don't create is resilient health systems, because that requires infrastructure, horizontal infrastructure investment. It isn't attractive because those philanthropies have a constituency that is not necessarily on the continent who want to see how many people got vaccinated for my money. While if you need to say we're actually building a workforce and the system that workforce will work in, it's a much more long-term investment, but it does actually result in resilient health systems. So that long-winded comment was actually to reflect on the fact that diasporans do tend to invest in their local health system, the community health center. In your town, your village, or your family it's not unknown that the electrification of the community, of the health center might be funded by family members living abroad. My foundation was established by the African Union as an independent foundation to leverage resources to support Africa CDC's mandate. And that's because Africa CDC, being part of the African Union, is actually constrained in its ability to engage with the private sector. So what we're trying to do is to actually open up a dialogue with the private sector, and specifically with that diaspora, to understand how we can help them to optimize their investment in the health system, focusing preferably on these more long-term infrastructural developments. And I'm really excited to hear the language that is being used here, and I suppose my question really is, how can we take this conversation further? Because we have some initiatives that we would want to open up a conversation about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think
And apologies for being so long-winded.
Yeah,
How many can you take?
there's a lot of hands. I think we'll do like 4 questions probably. I want to make sure people ask. But one thing I wanted to comment is, yeah, let's connect after, because we're deploying Pfizer, J&J, Sanofi, Genentech, all these companies that are here. They want to do something. They're just not sure what. So being able to deploy exactly what you're talking about.
Let's talk after, because
Right.
I also set up the Partnership for Africa Vaccines Manufacturing. So.
Perfect.
So Josh was
I think all the way in the back.
All the way
Yeah,
back.
yes, hand up first.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Paco Sando with Mazizi International. I just want to say thank you again for putting this together. This was an incredible event. To the speakers, thank you all for each of y'all's insights and wisdom that you've imparted onto us. I just kind of wanted to change the direction a little bit. And so I'm a firm believer that the diaspora of each nation are on the front lines of nation branding for each of these countries, and even garnering interest for like foreign direct investment for economic growth back home. I was wondering, how important do you all feel, and this is open to anybody who wants to answer, how important do y'all feel that support is for creatives within the diaspora, for cultural and economic growth back home? And have you seen any strategies from nations that have invested within the creatives that are a part of their diaspora?
So I think the creative industries is an amazing, amazing sector. I think we're at an inflection point where, I mean, I always think all the time, storytelling eats foreign policy for lunch. Creative industries is something that, it's new. It's new in terms of how we can mobilize the creative industries as a sector, but it's been around for several years, right? So film, arts, dance, all the above, poetry, and we're now using these gifts and these talents to really capitalize off of how can we institutionalize it, right, and invest in those sectors. So it's something that I think is very important. I know as, in the USG, we're taking it as an important sector to really invest in. I know Prosper Africa is doing the same. At the summit, we had a creative industries panel just to talk about the importance of supporting creatives, right? And quite frankly, I think the rise of diaspora engagement has much to do with how the creative industries has really been integral in putting culture, our social elements and politics, and all under one umbrella, right? When I went to Macy's the other day, I heard them playing WizKid in Macy's, and it's a joke, but it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal, the fact that and there are U.S. investors looking to invest in how can they strengthen, that market, whether it's Afrobeats, whether it's film, etc. Netflix has invested on the continent because of the creative industry sector, Apple TV, and so we're looking at how can we also work with some of these U.S. corporations, and quite frankly, we do a great job, right? The U.S. is a leader in this space, whether it's Netflix, Apple TV, Google, etc. We want to make sure that we're not missing the mark on truly capitalizing on the importance of elevating African voices, right, and investing in African voices, right? We have other adversaries and partners who are investing on the continent, but I think this is a space that we want to make sure that we're leading on and ensuring that we're elevating and amplifying African voices, whether it's arts, music, film, storytelling, etc.
And can I comment on that for just a second? So this is very dear to me as well because I was also I'm still an artist. Don't let the suit fool you. I used to, I started a record label that had Grammy-winning artists. I'm a poet, I'm a writer, so I'm a part of this broader media and creative industry, and I still wear that hat, when I need to. And I think there is something very magical about using your voice to really amplify a message. And we're at that stage now where we have an opportunity to really rewrite our history and tell it in a very different way. So that's how I see the power of creativity, right? And it's up to us as investors, as government officials, as entrepreneurs to really leverage this creative force that we have at our disposal. So definitely music, but beyond that, I tell my entrepreneurs every time I mentor them that they need to put a lot of emphasis on the power of their voice, right? Whether it's storytelling, media, we carry a lot of emotions as Africans, right? That's our strength. And you can use that to really change the narrative and attract the right type of investments and tell the story the way you want it to be told regarding your country. And then going beyond just the voice itself, when you attach that to real impact on the ground, economic impact and results, then that's where we would need the right infrastructure to elevate those results and show the connection, right? Because a lot of investors, a lot of stakeholders think of all of those industries as separate, industries. In my mind and in the minds of a lot of other folks, you need to look at it from a holistic perspective. So combining the power of creativity with, what makes sense, the language that makes sense for investors, so that they understand that you can use your voice to really tell a story about a success story that they can relate to from a financial perspective. So yeah, I think we need to leverage that strength.
Last one.
Good evening. My name is Earl Carr. I'm the founder and CEO of CJPA Global Advisors. We're an international consulting firm focused on raising capital for renewable energy companies in emerging markets. Thank you for an inspiring panel. The president of Kenya has created and proposed a global green bank. I'm curious to what you all think of this global green bank, and to what degree can the African diaspora play in supporting and augmenting this global green bank initiative?
I can say a few words. I was, right before coming here, I was with the president of Senegal talking about the green investment initiative across Africa, where we will be launching a large green banking opportunity and investment opportunity with the UAE and other different stakeholders to support Africa. I think we need to see more of those initiatives from the different nations, and also find a way to connect them all, right? Because what's going on in Kenya may not be known to what's going on in my native country of Cameroon, for instance, right? Or in Mali and so on. So figuring out a way to sort of highlight all of that, and maybe it's a platform like the one that Prosper created to really show what are the different opportunities that are being launched across the different markets. We do need that. We have an opportunity to really leverage and bring investors that care about green energy, that have deployed here in the US, across Asia, and that are looking at Africa. But again, there is sometimes a fear of the unknown, right? They hear about stories, to the point of the gentleman, about using your voice and being creative about the storytelling element. So they hear about the opportunities, but they would like to come in with the right type of stakeholders to guide them. And I think that's where we need to come all together and really come with a unified voice around that. So we'd love to know more about that particular initiative from Kenya and see how we could connect the dots with the one we're launching in West Africa.
Okay, I know we have a hard stop. I know Denise has to leave, but I'm going to leave it for Denise to close it, just to talk about last word.
Sure. I think this was a great panel. Thank you, Armaz, for putting us together. And I'm glad British was able to stay, talk about the great things that Prosper is doing. I think Prosper is a great resource. And you all should expect lots of exciting things in terms of our engagement with the diaspora coming up in the next few months or even in the next few weeks. I do think that this is a priority. The administration made it a priority, and so look forward to working with you all, look forward to working with ADN and other, I think, partners to really scale our engagement and provide support in any way we can. So thank you.
Great, thank you, everybody. Well, some of us will be here, so we can talk a little bit more.
But the thing I want to say, since I've been in the diaspora business for a long time, I do have some commentary that I want to add. I don't work on it anymore as much as I used to, but I remember when we, during Obama days with Secretary Clinton, I give credit to Secretary Clinton when she was the one who actually pushed us to do diaspora engagement in 2011. I don't remember when your president came and spoke at our forum, the Global Diaspora Forum. And one of the commentary I'll give you is when it comes to African diaspora is that I would say about 60 to 70% of the Global Diaspora Forum participants were Africans. Okay, they were the most engaged, but they were the least transactive. Meaning they're engaged, they come to forums, they speak and all that, but when it comes to actually talking about doing these transactions that we're talking about, they don't show up. And I'm saying this because I'm part of that community, so I can be critical of it. I have the license for it. So if you consider yourself an African diaspora, to pontificate about how engaged you are is already given. We know you're engaged, you want to, but then you have to take your engagement to transactional element of it, where you walk the talk. And I'm not even talking about money, I'm talking about actually help the entrepreneurs that we're talking about. Be their voice, be their market access, all those kind of things are needed. And I always find it heartbreaking that we show up in numbers, but when it comes to actually transactionally, we don't. And I hope the platforms that British is talking about and all that, and I want to give commentary too. British and I also, we go way back.
Way back.
When she was at PEPFAR, we were peers and talking about these things, and I was so ecstatic when I heard British was going to come run Prosper, because Prosper, frankly, is the most underutilized and unknown tool that the U.S. government has, and to have someone, a veteran, who knows what partnerships mean, who knows what these transactions means, and I can tell you, the African community should be celebrating British appointment. And please give her a round of applause. And I'm not being paid to say this, I meant that from the heart, and nothing but love for you. And everybody else, and Almaz, you put me on the spot since you gave me the microphone, I've got to give her props. Because I have never met anybody who is not just committed, but who are in your face if you don't do what you say you're going to do. And in our case, me and her, we have a common DNA, a place called Eritrea. And even if she has to use that, she'll use that against me. And so for her, not only I thank her for her collaboration and all that, but also her commitment to the continent. She's everywhere where she needs to be, not to talk about it, but to actually do them. So we're not worthy of you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I know, I'm not better than it. Go ahead, but that's pretty much what I have to say, and thank you for the kind words. I hope these conversations that we had, Brother Tongan right here, I met him recently. This guy says what he does.
Yeah.
So if he tells you that he has a fund, knock his door. And if he says, what's a passport, tell him my name, and he'll open the door. And anyway, Pedro, lovely to see you. Mr. Garn, you and I need to talk more. We haven't got a chance. But anyway, on that note, before I even speak, let me stop.